I've got a lot of questions to get through in the first Q&A of 2025. Let's get to it. This video is brought to you by Model Railroad Academy. Model Railroad Academy is your online resource for model railroad instructions, ideas, and information, with loads of tutorials and articles for model railroaders of every skill level. One of my personal favorites is Alan Keller's Great Model Railroads series. It is just so much fun to look at all of these different model railroads from all of these different great model railroaders and just get inspiration from those. Plus, you can find tutorials on everything from bench work to electronics to scenery, all sorts of things there. The first 1,000 people to sign up at the link in the description below will get a full year of premium membership to Model Railroad Academy for $1.49. Offer is valid for new members only. Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains a Day. I'm drinking some more of that Colombian Supremo. I'm going to run that out at some point. If you would like to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking and have it featured just like these guys right here, you can do that in the comments below, and who knows, you might see your name pop up on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Also, this is my monthly Q&A. If you want to have your question answered on the monthly Q&A, you can put that in the comments below. I would try to get it in within the first week of this posting because I have to stop there so that I can actually get this video recorded and edited. So make sure you get those questions in quick, guys. Cheers. DB576 says that they got their first locomotive for Christmas. Congratulations and Merry Christmas. That's a good present. It's a Kato UPGEES44AC, and he said it had a couple of coupler trip pins in a bag. Can you tell me why they would be there and how would you attach them? So here is basically what they are. So Kato has these little magnetic coupling tracks, and there's other things that do it too. And those little trip pins enable the magnetic coupling and uncoupling. And there's a little tiny hole in the couplers that you have to stick that in. Now it's kind of difficult, and I personally just most of the time don't worry about putting in those trip pins. It does look kind of nice, like it looks like some sort of hose that you would attach for something for brakes or something like that with your model railroad. But it's something that I don't think it's not mandatory, but if you want to use some of the uncoupling features in the uncoupling track, you will need those trip pins on there. But I don't personally attach those to most of my Kato locomotives. Dale Aarons asked about how T-Trak modules are held together. He asked, is it simply just the track connections or is there some sort of other mechanism? Yes, it is simply the track mechanisms. The Kato Unitrack is sturdy enough and strong enough to hold it in place when it's just sitting there, but it's pretty easy to take apart. So yes, nothing but the Kato Unitrack unijoiners hold those T-Trak modules together. Nicholas Felipe 4700 asked, what is my go-to brand for paint? Well, it depends on the project. If it's something that I can just knock out and it doesn't really matter about fading or anything like that, I'm going to just look at a cheapo apple barrel paint or something like that, one of the cheapo paints out there. If I'm going for something like a model that I'm building or something like that, I'm going to be looking at Vallejo. Vallejo is a really solid brand of paint, and you can find it in a lot of different places, and they have a lot of different colors and variety, so you're going to have a lot of options. Shukaku the Crazy says they're trying to plan an in-scale layout, and they're not exactly sure how to do anything really. He wants to have a loop of track and continuous running and wants passenger lines, and he's trying to figure out. So what I would do is start looking for inspiration in the real world. So if you're looking for loops, what I'd start looking at inner city rail and doing that, and then kind of figuring out what you want to do from there. It depends on your space. Do you want to model a specific spot where the trains are coming into a specific town, or do you want to have it in between two towns? Something like that, and you can do that, or you can have a hub like a Union Station that's going to be in a large city such as Philadelphia, DC, or I don't think DC has a Union Station. Denver has a Union Station. Those kind of things that have the different lines coming into them. So what I would do is a lot of passenger stations at those hubs are not on the line through. The train comes off and then goes into the station and then heads back out. So you can have the trains going around in your loops and then have them when they want to go in the station, they go off on a turnout and they go into the station. So, and then they can back right out and keep on going, something like that. Jedaheiser says they are in Germany and they don't really have space for a model railway layout in their rented home, but they do have a backyard, and they said it's open to the street, and they have a suggestion for a non-permanent garden railroad system available in Germany. Well, first of all, Germany is what I consider the cradle of modern model railroading. This is where model railroading, the first company Markland started and things like that. So, and Markland owns LGB, which is a G-scale company, and their track is pretty robust. You can usually lay it in the grass. I've seen people do that plenty of times and run trains depending on how level it is out there. But just LGB and their track, those are going to be the ones if you want to run it outdoors. That's going to be your best bet, especially in Germany, because that's where it's originally from. Michael H. Massey says that they're in Texarkana and there's a 4-way diamond. How cool. And he says he wants to do this in scale, and he would like for an Arduino to be able to automatically dispatch the block that would stop one engine from entering it, the crossover, if another engine is already occupied in the diamond when it's clear and waiting for the train. So the way that I would go about this is I would isolate the entire diamond and have its own DCC feed to it. I would then put a DCC current sensor on there, like a BD20, which is very easy to make talk to an Arduino. And I would use that to detect if a train is in the diamond. And then I would isolate the sections of track that are approaching the diamond. And you don't have to worry about the power there, but like I would have them each getting a power feeder and put a relay on them. So, and then program the Arduino to anytime it senses current within the diamond, it cuts the power to the approaches, and then you just have to isolate all of those. So that's the way that I would do that. Larry Brooks 1209 says they have a large collection of Kato steam and diesel locomotives. They're pre-DCC, and do you know of any small generic decoders that might work? So if I was putting in a small generic decoder for a Kato locomotive that doesn't have the drop-in, what I would look into is probably some of the generic Z-scale decoders from Digitrax. They're the DZ designation. You can also find some DN designations, but like the 123s and 126s, look at those. I think that the 123 or 126, one of those numbers, I'll link it in the description below. They have like a red shrink wrap, but that's going to be what your best bet's going to be. But also double check. Digitrax has a decoder selector, so see if you can find your locomotive on it and see if there is a decoder. So if you open it up and see that there is a circuit board that you can pop out easily, it's definitely probably a drop-in decoder compatible. Marconius asks, is there a steam engine that you'd want that hasn't been mass produced? So the one that I would want that hasn't been mass produced in scale, it's been made in HO scale, is the Russian Decapod, the 210O. There's one of these at the North Carolina Transportation Museum, and it's my favorite steam engine there. It's just a really cool thing. It's got some neat history behind it. It's been exported to several countries, including obviously Russia, Finland, China, Korea. It's actually was listed as operational as late as 2007 in North Korea, if we can believe that. But it has a cool story. Russia ordered a lot of them, and then when the Bolshevik Revolution happened, they just canceled the orders, and the USRA redistributed the locomotives that had already been built, the 200 that had been built. So, and about, I think, 25 railroads got them, and there's quite a few of those preserved. But I think an in-scale Russian Decapod would be one that I would really want. Chris Seamster 6985 asked us, temperature fluctuations hurt a layout? So it's complicated. Like wild temperature fluctuations are going to be anything that you're building like this. It's going to be difficult to handle. The one big thing, if anything is going to affect you with temperature, is going to be the expansion and contraction of your track. Your track's going to move just a little bit if you're dealing with temperature swings, especially wild ones. If you're going from like you're in an unair conditioned space in the 90s in the summer to below freezing in the winter, that's one thing that's going to happen with the expansion and contraction. So what you have to do is you have to leave a little expansion and contraction spaces so that the track can just move just a little bit and not tear itself apart. Now that's the great thing about using the T-Trak modules and the Kato Unitrack, is that I've already got all these built-in expansion and contraction joints, so I don't have to worry about it out in the garage where I am. Dirty Dan asks if I can do an updated version of the DCC-EX installation. I am working on that. They have added a ton of features. As a matter of fact, I'll show you this. Where is it? Hang on. Right behind me. Okay, this is my very rough prototype of the YT controller that they've worked on. I've just kind of rough 3D printed a box and put some stuff on it. This is not the final of what I want it to look like, but this thing, it can run my trains, as you can see right here. Maybe. Yep, there it goes. You can see I got a little bit of train action going on there. So that can do a lot of things. So there's a lot of new things with DCC-EX that I really just need to get my head around and make sure that I do that. So before I make a full update video, I need to get a lot of these projects and investigations done. Moonfixer asks about subway cars for modeling. Specifically, he wants to do the Washington Metro. So it's kind of hard to find subway cars right now. I did look around. It's going to be easier to find commuter trains. I think the only place I really found is like Japanese Kato sets, but I wasn't able to find any when I went looking around trying to answer this question. Phoenix Knight asked, how hard is it to paint an HO scale locomotive, and which would be better? Is there an airbrush or another way to do it with good results? So it really depends on your skill level. What I would do is I would go find some junkers, some shells and anything like that, and I would practice. And airbrushes are going to work fine. You're going to need some masking tape and things like that. You're also going to need some sort of thinner. Typically, I've seen where people use like windshield washer fluid for thinner, and that helps. There's also regular airbrush thinner and things like that. That helps a ton as well. But it really just comes down to practice and a locomotive that you can really take the parts off of and custom do it, and just taking your time. That's going to be the big thing. Dan's Hobby asks if anyone manufactures modern vehicles in HO scale. He says most of them you see are from the 50s to the 70s. So it's still kind of hard to find. I think that right now the 50s to the 70s are the big point for model railroading right now, because that's like Gen X and what they're seeing, and the big thing that you're going to see is what they want to model. So as it gets older, you're going to see more and more modern stuff. But I did see that Atlas and Athearn had some modern models, and also you can just go and check out like Train World and places like that. They have a whole vehicle section. There's a lot in there to check out, and there's also a lot of smaller manufacturers. I'm not going to try to go in there and name them all because I'll forget one, but there are smaller manufacturers that do it. Plus 3D printing may be a way to go as well. Cody Burdell asks, what's the best layout for an N scale? Oval, circle, or U shape, or anything like that? Well, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to do a lot of rail fanning and everything, you want to really have your loop, whether it's a standard oval or if it is a U shape like mine. If you want to do more operations, you definitely want to look at something like a shelf layout that runs along the wall that we have talked about in a previous video that I'll link right here. So it really just depends on what you want. Now, I do like the saying that, like, for different scales, if you want to do O scale, it's you want to model locomotives. If you want to do HO scale, it's because you want to model trains. If you want to do N scale, it's because you want to model railroads. N scale allows you a bit more space in terms of how much you got to use, so you can do a bit more larger things, like larger trains and things like that, and that's where a loop can help out. But it really all depends on what you want to do. Cinephile Railroad 199 asks, since there have been a lot of model trains appeared in lots of various TVs and movies over the last years and decades, do you have a favorite such instance? So this is going to be a little bit weird because I am a millennial, born in the 80s, raised in the 90s, and that means that I grew up in the age of Thomas. Thomas was really even bigger than it was today. It's like it's everywhere, and that is an entire G-scale miniature railroad. So if I had to pick a favorite, and I know that technically this isn't like a model thing, but if you look back and you look at the track and you watch it, they use the LGB track, you can see it, and you can see all sorts of different G-scale items on there. So I think Thomas is something that really influenced me in model railroading, believe it or not. Money Badger Productions says, how many industries is good for an average or smaller size layout? So I really like odd numbers for industries, so I either like 3 or 5. So if it's an average size layout, I might go for 5, or I might put some bigger ones and go for 3 bigger ones. So what I mean by bigger ones is you may have 5 smaller industries that are just a single siding that has a couple of cars, or you may have 2 or 3 larger industries that are multiple sidings. Think of grain facilities, think of steel mills and things like that. So it really just depends on what the industry is and how many operations you want to do. Do you want to have one big industry with a very complex job, or do you want to have a bunch of little industries like you're running on a branch and going and serving these industries as you go down the line? So that's what it really depends on. Battleship Orion says, what effect do you see short lines such as the Genesee and Wyoming subsidiaries and counterparts taking up the hobby? So I'm starting to see a lot of this, and I'm starting to see a lot of people do their own thing. So the big one for here, this is based on the Yadkin Valley Railroad, which is a GNO subsidiary, and it's a fairly small one, but I'm starting to see a lot of class 3s out there. And I think it's because they're simpler to model and you can do them in less space, and a lot of people that grew up next to them, it really means a lot to them. So you're still going to see plenty of large class 1s and things like that that are modeled, but I think you see a lot of people with these class 3s and these short lines that are just modeling them because they love them and they love the feel. It's kind of like a more intimate feel of railroading. Keg1029 asks about the T-Trak standard for wiring. Has it been blue on the outer rails and white on the inner rails? And is there a way to add a crossover without causing a short? So for the record, this railroad, I do not do the standard. I do not intend for this railroad to travel, so I did blue, white, which are the color of the feeders that you put in there. But blue, white, blue was designed to be able to make sure that even if you flip the modules back and forth, they're still going to match. Now with the crossovers, what you have to do is, even if you take the blue, white, and white, blue, and so that you don't get the short, you just hook them up to the opposite, reverse the polarity of the one of the tracks so that they'll still match up. So you can still do blue, white, blue. You just have to make sure that, like, so I would, for instance, wire up my inner and outer loops completely separately and have them come together, and then I would just connect them opposite if I'm doing the crossover with DCC, so that's going to prevent any shorts. Mickey Hill says that they are wondering about sound locomotives and custom sounds, and which one would I use. Digitrax and ESU are the two main ones for custom sounds in terms of loading up anything, and Digitrax and ESU both specifically require custom equipment to be able to install those. The Digitrax requires like a PR3 or a PR4, which is usually, I think I got mine for about $70. I have both of these. And the ESU Loc Programmer is about $150. Sometimes you can find it on sale. But those are the two main things that you need. Supposedly you can do the loading of it, the sounds through JMRI, but I've never been able to do that. But you will still need the PR4 and the ESU Loc Programmer on those decoder systems. So yeah, still love the flag 1008. Ask about gluing down track and what do you have to do if you have to replace it. Well, it depends on the glue that you use. So let's say you're using one glue that I really like to use for putting down track that's going to hold well but is fairly easy to remove is latex caulk. It takes a little while to set up, but that is one that I've used with great success, and it's fairly easy to remove because it kind of just comes as a little gum ball that you can peel off later. So that's another thing. If you're using white glue, you can just use water to remove it. If you're using super glue, good luck, but hey, sometimes that's what works best. So usually removing and replacing track is always going to be a job, and you just need to be super careful about it. Thomas L. Durbin asked about airbrushes and what do I do. I just have a little cheapo airbrush. I'm not going to lie. It has a little tiny compressor on it, and that's what I use. I'll link it in the description below, but I don't airbrush all that much, but that's what I use. Tia Edge asked if I subscribe to any of the magazines or things for ideas or things like that. The main magazines I subscribe to Model Railroader. I subscribe to Model Railroad Hobbyist, and I also have a subscription to Model Railroad Academy, Trainmasters TV, Trains.com, and I also listen a lot to the Around the Layout podcast, which you can also get Model Railroad news from there once a month from Tony Cook. So those are typically what I subscribe to. TV Model RR asks, what do you think that 3D printing is impacting the hobby like? So basically, I think that 3D printing is ultimately a great thing. I'm seeing a lot of little cottage manufacturers and industries pop up for those little very bespoke pieces that people need, but I don't think it's going to really get into it's not at the point where it can take over injection molded manufacturing. It's just not. The parts are more fragile and things like that. But in terms of small detail parts and things like that, and even making custom locomotives, yes, you can do that. But in terms of the mass production of stuff in our hobby, I don't think that 3D printing is quite there for rolling stock and locomotives. People still can make them individually, but in terms of making them en masse, it's not there yet. Marshall Blue says that he has a HO layout at his grandfather's house, but only a 2x6 foot area for a layout at his house, and he's been considering in scale. Definitely, I would go in scale. You're going to be able to get a lot more in that space. Unless you want to do a little switching layout, then you can totally do HO scale. But if you only got 2 feet by 6 feet and you want to do a lot of train running and things like that, in scale is going to be definitely the way to go. If you want to have a question answered in next month's Q&A, you can put that in the comments below. I only ask that you try to get those in quickly because I wait about a week and then I start collecting the questions to answer and record the video. So thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.